Well, hello everyone. Good evening or good morning or good whatever time it is, wherever you are, wherever you're watching this. Welcome back to Choose Your Character. I'm Mike, and with me tonight is our friend Rachel. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm not too shabby, all things considered.
All things considered, yes, this is the year of all things considered and unprecedented times and many other now overused phrases, but it is good to hear that you are doing well despite the circumstances. Rachel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know this is question number 5 on our agenda, but screw it, I'm skipping to it. Tell us about some of your involvement in the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra.
So, a couple years ago, I was hanging out on Reddit, as you do, and there was just this random post in the Connecticut subreddit, and it was like, "Hey, do you like video games? Do you like music? Do you want to come play video game music?" And I was like, "Okay, that sounds pretty cool." Um, so this is when the orchestra was in its infancy, and when I say that, I mean like they've been around for like maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and so there was no information. They had no social media, no website, no Facebook. They had nothing. So I I was like, I want to do this, but it's in Norwalk, which is like an hour from where I live. And it was late at night, like the rehearsals was like at 6 o'clock or something like that. And it was dark outside. So I was like, I'm a little creeped out because I'm being asked to go to like this random place and just trust that people will be there and like they're not going to shank me or something.
Trust that people you learned about from the internet, which, as we all know, is the
Exactly.
safest place.
Right. So we all grew up with stranger danger and don't
Hmm.
meet people from the internet. I am a product of my generation, so even to this day, like that still resonates a little bit. Um, so I told my husband, I'm like, I'm gonna be at this place at this time, and I'm gonna text you. If you don't hear from me, like call the cops because something has gone horribly wrong. just to be safe, right? So I went and I think I played like 2 notes my first rehearsal. I was terrified, but it was so much fun, and I was like, you know what, this is really something that I want to keep doing. Um, and so I did, and here we are 4 years later.
Yeah, and so from these humble beginnings, you mentioned that we had no social media, we had no website. Maybe you bring these up because these are things that you've I would say helped out with, but that sounds like an understatement because you kind of just did these things. You're like, we need these things, so I'm going to do
Well, yeah, I don't bring them up because I did them.
it.
I just bring it up because in this day and age, like it's very strange to not have something like that, especially if you
Mm.
want other people to get involved. So I went to Brian, our president, and I'm like, look, at the very least, like let me get a Facebook going and get the word that we exist out there. So this way, when other people come across us, like I did, they're not going to have to do the whole stranger danger, tell somebody I'm going somewhere, call the cops kind of thing, and hopefully we can get more people to come. So, yeah.
Yeah. So at least they can see some pictures of us and get some evidence that, like, okay, this is a group. They seem to be around musical instruments and not around dangerous weapons. Uh,
I mean, there are some instruments that could be used as weapons, so.
I mean, there's a
Hmm.
reason they call the guitar an axe. So, uh, although I've never used it for that. Please don't swing my guitar around like an axe. Okay,
I won't, I promise.
cool. So yeah, thank you very much for all that work that you do. In addition to that, I believe this was mentioned in a couple of the social media announcements about tonight's interview. You also serve as our vice president. So
Yep.
tell us a little bit about what kind of work that entails. What goes into that?
Um, so I kind of accidentally fell into being vice president. Um, Along the way to becoming legit, um, you have to do a couple things to become like a nonprofit and file paperwork and make sure that you're they're not employees but like members of the orchestra, like for all intents and purposes from like the government perspective they're employees. um, Make sure that everybody is taken care of and stuff like that. So um, it's not nearly as glamorous as it sounds. It's really just a lot of making sure things get done, making sure that agreements are signed, making sure that bank accounts are taken care of, making sure that, people are doing what they need to do. But I kind of just, like I said, I fell into it because in the process of like making the website and the Facebook, like a year or two went by, and then it's like, well, we want to do more things. We want to rehearse at different spaces. So you need insurance in order to be able to rehearse in some public spaces. Well, we can't get insurance because we're not a company, we're not a nonprofit, we're not any of these things. So in order to do the things we want to do, we have to have some legal standing. And I was like, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just full out, just get started and we'll deal with it. And so kind of got the ball rolling and kind of just de facto, like not de facto, like we had a vote and everything. So like it's not like I'm vice president and you're going to be whoever and you're the treasurer and
Yeah, it's
stuff
not
like
like you
that.
led a coup.
No. And certainly, I mean, if people think I'm doing a bad job, I want you to tell me. All right. So, but yeah, so.
Yeah, well, personally speaking, I don't think you've done a bad job. I think you've done a good job, and that's why I keep voting for you. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, in addition to all these different instruments that you play that I think we're going to get to in a few minutes, you do all this kind of administrative and executive work within the group, which I think can sometimes be kind of unsung and maybe underappreciated. But I just wanted to dedicate a little bit of time tonight to say, like, we see you and we
Aw,
appreciate the work that you do, and you do
thank
good
you.
work.
Thank you.
Um,
I appreciate that.
all right, so let's get let's lose our train of thought and not know how the segue is going. That is my current plan. Hello, Kat. Kat, I did not agree to interview you, so you will be fielding no question. All right, this isn't
You
part
hear
of the
that,
agenda.
sugar? No questions.
Who is this cat? Who is this cat?
Oh, that's sugar.
Hi, sugar.
Sugar snap, sugar pants.
Amazing. Okay. Let's get back. This interview's going great. I'm having a great time. All right. Rachel, what is your gamer tag, and why don't you explain sort of the origin of your gamer tag?
So my gamer tag is Rachka. It's been that for probably 20 something years.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So my full name is Rachel, and you can shorten that to Ray, except that everybody and their brother has Ray as a nickname, right?
Right.
So if I
RAY
ever
is
RAY, REI, if it doesn't matter the permutation, it's already taken everywhere.
yeah.
Even in 1999, 2000, whatever, like it was already gone. And I don't know how it came about or how this thought popped into somebody's head, but I was just hanging out with my friends, and one of them just goofily adopted a Russian accent, and they just tacked the SHKA on there. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to run with it. I'm going to take it. It's going to be mine because nobody else is going to have that ever. And so, yeah, I've used it for almost like 20 years on the internet everywhere. So not just my gamer tag. It's like literally like my online handle everywhere. Be careful if you look me up because there is some angsty preteen garbage out there, which I wish I could erase, but we all know the internet's forever.
What are you talking about? I've never done anything on the internet that I've been later embarrassed about. And so I think this is very surprising, and you should be shamed for it. That's sarcasm, by the way. I know that doesn't always come across on the internet. That was sarcasm. So cool. Yeah, I don't want to attempt a goofy Russian accent for fear of insulting anyone, but that is a very funny way for Ray to get sort of spun into something unique that you can claim as your own. Rachel, what instruments do you play? We've mentioned several times that you're a multi-instrumentalist. What are some of these multiple instruments that you play?
So I'm primarily a flautist or a flutist, depending which direction you hail. But I also play the tenor saxophone, I play the violin, and I play the harp. Sort of. Kind of.
Kind
you
of.
can see the harp back there.
Look at that harp. Look at it there. It's just ready to be plucked.
Yes.
So you say you're primarily a flautist. I'm gonna go with flautist. I'm gonna stick with that. And I see below in our agenda spoilers that you have several different types of flutes.
Yes.
So which types do you play? And I'm gonna be the guy asking the ignorant questions because I think that's the role of the interviewer. Are those all the types of flutes? Are there types of flutes that you don't play? And which of them would you say you're the best at, or which of them would you prefer, if those are two different questions? So basically, tell me about flutes.
So the concert flute is the one I've played the longest. I've played that since like third grade. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was. Um, but that's kind of like, if you play the flute, that's where you get started, unless you get started on a recorder first and then kind of transition over. I also have a bass flute. I have an alto flute, and I have they call it a simple system flute. It's a flute from the early 19th century. Um, I I have a real sweet spot in my heart for like the low sounding instruments. So the bass flute and the alto flute are probably the ones that I like to play the most. The bass flute is a little more difficult, especially within an orchestra, because it's so soft sounding and so low that it's hard to project your sound outwards and be
Mm.
heard. So it's much better in like a flute choir or a small ensemble kind of setting. But I do have uh, video game pieces that have been written for the NGSO that allow me to play the bass flute. So that's pretty cool.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, getting the live mix of instruments. I am in no way an expert, but it seems like a kind of tricky proposition. So I can understand if one or more instruments kind of unfortunately like disappear unless you have more people more people power playing these instruments, and that's something that
Yeah.
we're still working on as an orchestra. It's just getting the numbers. So this is all an attempt to recruit new people. So hey, new people, if anything that we've talked about for the past what 4 or 5 episodes, or anything that we talk about in the future is interesting to you, website, it's down there, it's in the
Yeah.
corner. She made it. She made it. So you know it's good. So go visit and join us.
Come join us when COVID is done and it's safe to do so.
Come digitally join us.
Yes, that too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this isn't necessarily specific to you, but something that the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra has been doing in these times of lockdown when we can't get together and rehearse together and perform publicly together is we've been doing these kind of virtual recitals, which gives people an opportunity to still engage in music and still engage in their love of video game music and then share it with people. So
And shameless plug, we have a YouTube. Uh, Stuff does get posted to our YouTube. The recitals do get posted. We're actually going to have our second recital get posted next week, so keep an eye out for that.
yeah, there are some really good performances in that. Um, and I believe we're in the early stages of planning another one, although I'm
Yep.
not sure we settled on a date yet. So if you're watching this somewhat recently, it's not too late. Join in, play some music. It'll be fun. All right. So let's get to some of the meat. Let's get to the meat of this interview. Let's talk about video games. I'm a male on the internet. I want to talk about video games. um
Don't we all?
yeah, that's what we're here for, partially. Um, so let's talk about some of your favorite video games. You've listed, I believe, 6 different video games here, and you have a whole bunch of honorable mentions. So let's get started. Let's jump into it. What kind of video games do you like to play, or have you liked to play
uh,
in the past?
so it depends what phase of my life you're talking about. When I was a teenager, I was very heavy into the JRPGs.
Hmm.
Um, I now, since I don't have nearly as much time, I prefer more like Metroidvania kind of games that I can just kind of pick up and put down. That I don't have to sit and try and remember 60 hours of story for. But a little bit contradictory to that is that I am an MMO player and
Hmm.
have been for I don't know how many years. How long ago was 2004? However many years ago that was. Um, so I kind of run the gamut. I'm not a huge fighting game person, but there is like one or two fighting games out there that I do appreciate. Um, so yeah, like where do you want to start?
Well, you have a short list here, and as in many things, I like to start at number one. So what's the first? You know, I'm assuming that you're the one that listed these in a certain order. I'm assuming you had an idea to them, but I don't know. Maybe you want to
No,
do whatever order you want.
I guess they might be slightly chronological, but they're not like really ranked in any kind of order. So I guess for the first one, I like puzzle games. So when I was a little baby PlayStation gamer, when I was just learning about video games, sort of, I have a weird relationship with video games. I wasn't really allowed to play video games as a kid. So it wasn't until I was like 10 or 11, 12 that I really got involved. So one of the first games that I played is an old PlayStation 1 game called Intelligent Cube. And I don't know how many people out there know of this game. I kind of get the impression it was not a popular game, but
I've never heard of it.
I loved it to death. Basically, the whole premise is you play this tiny little guy. You're just like this one character, and you have this platform. And this platform, thanks, Mike.
Helping out.
This platform is made up of cubes, and you get a row of cubes that will rotate towards your player. Now, your player can highlight a square on the ground, and it's kind of like a bomb. If you push the right button at the right time, the square, if it has a cube on top of it, that cube will disappear. It'll just vanish. And the goal of the game is to get all of the proper cubes to disappear. Now, they have special cubes that will kind of like cause an explosion and delete the blocks that are surrounding it. They have cubes that you are not supposed to get rid of. And if you do, if you accidentally kill them or whatever you want to call it, it actually shrinks your playing platform. So I think at the start of the game, you start with a platform that's like 20 deep and 5 wide. And then it keeps getting wider and wider and wider and wider. So as you lose length on your platform, you start running out of space to get rid of all of these cubes that are tumbling their way towards you. It's a really simple premise for a game, but I can't say that I remember the music from it very well, so I don't think the soundtrack was that impressive. But as far as like puzzle games go, I don't know that like I've really seen anything else that's kind of similar to that. You know, because like you have puzzle games like Tetris and Puzzle Quest, and they all have like their clones that come off of them, or that are very similar, very iterative off of them.
Right.
I think there's like an Intelligent Cube 2, maybe. I don't know if it ever made it to the US. But yeah, it's a great game. I think it actually hit the PlayStation Store on the PS3 a while ago. So like if you're really like just in a hardcore like puzzle, like yeah, let's go, I want something new, like I highly recommend you to check it out or try and pick up an old copy on like eBay or something.
Yeah, just from your description, it sounds like I want to go look at some YouTube footage or something to kind of understand what's going on. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, I'm not the best at describing things. I'm sorry. Like I really should have been more prepared. Like no, but yeah, it's I promise you, it's great.
I believe you. And you know what? Sometimes games that even games that aren't great can still make a big impression on us, and we can like them. So,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying Intelligent Cube is a bad game. It sounds like a fun game. I just want to watch a video to see what it looks like. All right. So, what else is on this list? This short list of video games.
So next up is Unreal Tournament, specifically Game of the Year edition.
Okay.
This is I don't want to say a product of my childhood, but I have a number of fond high school memories playing this game. This is back when like LAN parties meant bringing the giant CRT monitors and your giant towers, and you're running like Windows 98. And so like once a month, me and 6 or 7 friends would get together and then come over to my house, and we'd set up a LAN party and we would just play Unreal Tournament like all weekend. Like that's all we ever did. I am still a terrible Unreal Tournament player, but I have such fond memories that even after like the next iterations of Unreal Tournament came out, like we would still go back to like the Game of the Year edition just because like that's what we were, not that we were comfortable with it, but what we had the most fun with. Yeah.
Yeah. I went to exactly one LAN party near the end of my high school experience, and I wish I had been doing that my entire life because it was just a lot of fun. Um, so yeah,
What
definitely.
what's not so much fun is having most people on Windows 98 and one person on Windows 95 and then trying to get the correct network adapters on the Windows 95 machine and like destroying it somehow because you deleted the wrong thing. I you know, this is like so many years later and I still feel bad, but we actually had that happen to one guy. And it's like he spent the whole weekend like freaking out and reinstalling Windows on his machine. Like, oh, and
While
this
the
was
rest of
back
you
in
all
the day
play
when you,
Unreal Tournament.
yeah. I mean, we tried to help him out, but I mean, we wanted to play, you know,
Yeah.
so we were going to play. And this is back in the day when like when it's still dial up. It's not, you know, you can't just go out and download a new copy of Windows at that point. So
Right.
that was rough.
Gosh, there's some really good things about modern internet, and I guess that's one of them. So yeah, tons of Unreal Tournament over at LAN parties. I keep getting Unreal Tournament mixed up with Quake, so I'm not actually sure I've played any Unreal Tournament. But I
It's close enough, you know, same
yeah,
thing. Don't
maybe
crucify me, all right? Just
I.
saying. Internet denizens, don't come for me. Don't at me.
Why don't we just move on? Let's move on before anyone catches on that maybe we're not, you know, the greatest well researched video game experts in the world. Um, hold on a sec. No, we're moving on. All right. What's next on this list?
Next on this list is Xenogears. As I mentioned, I had a very large JRPG phase to my life. Xenogears is not the first JRPG I ever played, but it is probably one that really stuck with me the longest. The story is one of the first where I realized that video games could be like a really great storytelling mechanism. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, like there are plenty of games out there that have great story. You know, like all the different Final Fantasy games, Brave Fencer Musashi, Parasite Eve. Again, like all kind of that same time frame. But there was just something to the story in Xenogears that it stuck with me. It was very complex. It didn't try to dumb things down. It had a lot of religious overtones and a lot of political intrigue, and the music was amazing. And I know there are other games that came before, you know, like Chrono Trigger and stuff like that, that do the same thing. You know, they have a complex story and the music is fantastic. But I missed out a little bit on that generation of games. Like I had a Super Nintendo, but I only had King Arthur's World and Super Mario Brothers. Like that's it. That's all I had. So for me, like my personal experience with games, like this was kind of like my aha moment of when I understood just how complex video games could be. It also kind of made you realize that you kind of had to have the right people telling the right kind of story, because there is an art and there is a talent to writing a story that can be translated through this unique medium. I mean, you know, with books, you leave everything up to the imagination of the reader, and with movies, you present everything to the watcher. And video games at the time was this weird in between niche because you're presenting some things, but it's not high fidelity. You have to fill in a bunch of stuff with your own imagination, and you're reading a lot of text, and there's a lot to keep track of. And I really appreciated that you could approach it almost as if it were a complex novel, like just like a visual novel, kind of, so to speak. And I think it was a while before I ended up coming across another game that kind of resonated in the same way, or kind of hit me the same way, that like, yes, this is a greatly executed story in this medium, and I absolutely adore it. Xenogears was also the first soundtrack that I purchased. And I want to be clear here, it's not the first video game music that I ever collected or that I first downloaded, because back when zip drives existed, showing my age, you could download MIDIs, right? So I had this massive MIDI collection, but you're out there being a pirate. Xenogears was the one where I first went out and sought like the actual soundtrack, an actual orchestral recording of the soundtrack to own, so that I could have it, so that I could listen to it, so I could just keep listening to that music and I didn't have to keep playing the game to listen to the music. So maybe that kind of tells you like just how impactful it was. And it's still, still is, like, I still have so much Xenogears music in rotation. I won't say daily because I don't listen to it that much, but it's up there. It's pretty close.
Now again, I'm gonna be the ignorant interviewer. Xenogears, is that related to Xenoblade, or is it not related at all?
Sort of. So Xenogears and Xenosaga and Xenoblade, they're related, but like only tangentially.
Okay.
Some of them are kind of like in the same universe-ish. Some of them are kind of like a prequel kind of story, and then some of them are just like, yeah, it shares the same name, and there's like one character that might be somehow related to the original, but not really. But yeah, the sad thing is originally it was slated, I think, to be like a series of games, like from the start. And I don't know if it was just that the reception wasn't as good as they expected, or if they got pulled onto other projects. But it never coalesced. Like the other stories never coalesced the way that they wanted. So that's why, like, you have Xenogears on the PlayStation 1, and then it was late PlayStation 2 before Xenosaga came out. And then I think there's a second Xenosaga game. And I have read interviews where they just said like the story wasn't executed the way that they wanted to. They weren't able to give the whole story. So almost like ever since then, like there's been these reincarnation versions of the story where they try different things. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's like the first game wasn't good enough for them or what. But regardless, like it was good enough for me. So
yeah, I mean, just from hearing you talk about it, it sounds like it made a huge impact, and it's probably worth checking out, regardless of how its reception might have been at the time. I mean, you received it well, it seemed. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, it's unfortunately a series that I have zero experience with, so I would have to go in fresh and kind of check it out. But I'm looking forward to doing that. Let's move on. Let's talk about another game on your list. If I am remembering correctly, earlier you said you weren't that big into fighting games. This might be an exception to that, right?
Yep. This is this game and one other game. So the other game would be a game called Tobal Number One, which again
Okay.
I'm not sure is a game that many people know about. It had character designs done by the same artist who drew the Dragon Ball Z
Ooh,
characters,
shoot,
Akira
Akira Toriyama.
Toriyama. Yep.
Yeah.
But it was just your generic run-of-the-mill stupid fighter game. No story really whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
It was stupid fun. But this game, Guilty Gear X2, this game, I spent so much time. I don't know how many hours I sunk into it. I'm sort of glad, like, on the Switch, like nowadays, it tells you like how many hours you've played certain games.
Yep.
I'm I'm sort of glad that there wasn't really a tracker that told you how many hours you spent in this game, because it was far too many. It
Was
was
it was it in the tens? Was it in the hundreds? Was it in the thousands?
easily in the hundreds.
Okay.
Let's put it this way: they came out with a version of it for the Switch. I say a version. It's basically the exact same game for the
Mhm.
Switch. I think they called it Accent Core. Um, let's just say that muscle memory kicked in,
Mm.
and I'm playing this game 15 years later, and I don't even have to think about what I'm doing because my fingers are just like, "Yep, this is how you do the thing," and I'm like, "Wait." It's a very surreal experience because you're like, "How did I do that? How did I know how to do that? What? I just." It's so weird. And my husband was watching me play it, and he's like, "How do you know that? How do you know like how to do the certain specials?" And like I'm like, "I don't know. Like I just do it. Like
The
I
brain
don't."
doesn't know, but the fingers are moving. This
Exactly. And how the storylines go and how they fit together, and like, so there's story trees where like you have to win certain battles in order to branch off into like different parts of the story, and it's like,
Mm.
oh, I lost that battle, so I can't do this one over here. Like my brain remembers like how all those trees like branch off of
Mm.
one another, and I was like, I admittedly, like, I started to play it recently on the Switch, and I'm like, you know what? I need to put this down, because if I don't, I'm gonna lose my life. That's it. I will play nothing else for who knows how long. So it's kind of one of those guilty pleasure games. I may or may
Pun
not be very
intended,
good at
pun
it.
not intended.
Thanks for pointing out my joke. Um, but no, like I may or may not be good at it because I never actually played against people. I
Mm.
only ever played like story mode against the CPU. So I might actually completely suck at the game for all I know when it comes to playing against other people. And I'm okay with that. But yeah, it's one of the few fighting games. And I've tried to get involved. I've tried to like other fighting games since then. The Tekken games, I've tried to play, Smash, all the various iterations of Smash, and I know it's sacrilege. It's sacrilege. Don't at me. I know it. I know you're coming for me, but I can't, for whatever reason, I can't get into them. So
I mean, I'm not into fighting games in general either. But like you, I have my exceptions. So who who's gonna at you? Who's gonna at you? Who
oh, it's
wants
just somebody will.
whatever? We don't need to pay them any heed. All right. Let's move on to a game on this list that I have played. What's next on this list?
The next on this list is Ori. Um,
Yeah.
I actually started playing Ori because of the orchestra. Uh,
Ooh.
we played a medley from Ori, and the music was amazing. Like I fell in love with the music when we played it. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna download it, and we'll see what happens. And I I think I blew through it. Now for me, I went through it in about 2 weeks. And
Okay.
that's pretty good.
Hmm.
I'm not a completionist, right? So I kind of did like the bare minimum to complete the game. um, but it was great. I had so much fun, and it's one of the reason I put it on this list is because I feel like it's it's a good game for a bunch of different skill levels, but it's a very beautiful game. Um, one might even say lush.
One could say that.
Uh, but it's one of the only games where I heard the music first. and was like, the music inspires me. I want to play because of the music. If the music is this good, hopefully the game lives up to that same standard, right? And it did. Like, I had so much fun, and I'm, like I said, like nowadays, like I'm good with like the Metroidvania and the platform kind of games. And this is probably one of the games that kind of kicked off that phase a little bit. And it's one that, like, I'm not one to replay games. I say, as I just said, I rebought Guilty Gear.
I
But
wasn't going to point it out.
no, I'll admit to it, you know. But Ori is one of those games that, like, I have no problems like just sitting down for a couple hours and replaying parts of the game, or you know, not every other month, but like every couple months, like just playing another chunk of the game. It's great to put down and pick up, and it's relaxing. Like, it's relaxing. Like, there's that little bit of challenge to it. But then the rest of the time you're just out and about and exploring, and it's so much fun. I love it. It's great.
Now, did you play the sequel, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, as well?
I have not. So here's the thing. I went out and bought an Xbox for Will of the Wisps and the Halo Master Chief Collection.
Heck yeah, two good games.
What happened was my husband and I replayed all of Halo. So Halo has a special place in my heart because my husband and I have played the campaign together of every Halo game. Every Halo game. With the exception of the very first one, as they were released. So when the Master Chief Collection came out, we're like, yeah, let's do this. Come on, let's just sit down. Let's go through them all. Let's do the campaign again. And we did when we went through all of them. And so I got distracted. By Halo. And then my husband kind of took over the Xbox with Borderlands. So he's primarily been playing Borderlands a lot. And I've been frittering away my life in Animal Crossing and Hades. And
Hades the video game.
Yes, Hades the video game. And Tetris 99. So I it's on my list of things to play. I do want to get there. I have high expectations, but I also want to like actually like dedicate the time to my first playthrough. I don't want to like pick it up for 10 minutes and put it down and then leave it for a month and then come back. At least not on my first playthrough. You know, I could do that subsequent playthroughs, but I really want the story and I want to enjoy it the first time I play it through. So I want to set aside the time to really do that.
Yeah, I think just like the first game, it is well worth giving it your full attention. And so I can definitely empathize with the desire to want to sit down and give it the attention it's worth. Yeah, I also played Ori after the orchestra did that medley. So I enjoyed getting to the places where that music played. It's like, oh wow, you know, not only is the music great, but it fits the environment and the action that's happening so well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I fell in love with Ori very deeply when I played it. I think that was back in 2017, but I don't quote me on that. It might have been a year later. It might have been 2018. But yeah, Ori good. Ori was very good. All right, we've got one more on this list here before we get to your collection of honorable mentions. And I didn't see Halo on this list of honorable mentions, so I'm penalizing you 1 point for bringing it up and talking about it. You also brought up Borderlands, but your husband was playing that, so we'll let that slide.
So here's the thing about Borderlands. I bought it originally for like the original Borderlands I bought for me, and I wanted to really like it, and I didn't. And so I'm like, here, do you want to play this? And he's like, sure, I'll give it a shot. And then that's it. Like, I never saw him again. And now he's played Borderlands 2. We went to when we went to PAX, like there was some like special event thing at PAX. I have no idea what it was about, but he was like, I need to go to this. I need to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. Like, I don't see why not. Go
A
have
mighty
fun.
need was had.
Exactly. So at least somebody enjoyed it, you know?
Yeah. But okay. I'm not interviewing your husband. I'm interviewing you. So let's talk about games that you like. What's the last game on this list?
The last game on this list, I have so many hours. It's Final Fantasy 14.
It's a very popular
Don't
one, from what I understand.
don't let me talk forever about this game because I totally will.
I'm giving you a 10-minute limit.
Good. I'll use the whole thing.
We're starting.
It's 42 after now. All right, 52. Cut me off. Just kill the mic. But yeah, so I'm a big MMO player, although I strictly play 14 nowadays.
Okay.
I started with, oh gosh, I don't, before Final Fantasy 11, there was MapleStory. There was WoW for a little bit, but it didn't really hold my interest, and it kind of competed for Final Fantasy 11. So I played Final Fantasy 11 for like a million years. And so when Final Fantasy 14 came out, I was like, heck yes, I'm there. All right, let's do it. 14 is interesting because it's one of the only games that I know of where it released and was so terrible that they fired the dev team. They canonically brought the servers down, hired a new dev team, took a year to rework everything, brought everything back up, and now it's like, what, 6 years later, 7 years later, and it's like still going strong, and we just had one of the most impactful expansion stories like in the entire history of the game. When this game started, it was built on the Crystal engine, and I don't know how much you know, but the Crystal engine is
Zero.
All right. So, little bit of gaming history. The Crystal engine is what Square used for their Final Fantasy games on the PlayStation 3. So it was this really powerful, beautiful rendering engine platform, but it didn't translate very well to the PC. I had to go out and build a new rig in order to play this game, and it easily cost me like $2,000.
Yeah.
And this is like 2007-ish dollars. So
Yeah.
so it's quite a chunk of money, you know.
Yeah, that's a beefy computer at the time.
Exactly. And like they had like pots that had like 10,000 polygons. Like it's an inanimate object and it has 10,000 polygons. Like what are you doing?
But it's an important pot.
I guess. So one of the missteps that they made is that they really focused on how pretty the game was instead of the actual mechanics of the game. They came from a perspective of 11 did it this way and 11 was really successful, so we're just going to make 14 be 11 version 2. But what they didn't really count on is that times had changed. People have moved on. They don't sink so much time into like the grindy aspects of MMOs anymore. And they actively worked against their player base. Like they put in a system where you would gain less XP the more you played, to the point where like if you played for so long in a week, you would no longer gain XP. Like there was no point in playing at that point.
Okay.
Right? Like
isn't that the opposite of what you want your players to do? Don't you want them to play more?
You would think that, but they were really trying to control the pacing and the speed at which you played, and they were trying a way to keep most of the player base at the same level so that some people couldn't race ahead and get through everything, which I mean, does happen when you play an MMO. There are some people who can only dedicate an hour a week, and there are some people who can dedicate 30 hours a week, and they're going to have vastly different experiences. So they did a number of things with the best intentions, but with the worst execution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were a lot of things that were good about the game. They had a really neat job system where you could basically play any class that you wanted, and you could gather skills from all the different classes, and you got like 10 slots or 20 slots or whatever, and you could just fill them with whatever skills you wanted. So if you wanted to be a marauder and wield an axe, but also use some black magic and white magic or whatever, like you could do that. Like it was possible. They have since changed that system. You can no longer do that. Mm-hmm. But they've made a lot of improvements. So when they fired the dev team, they brought an entire new dev team. They took a year to rewrite everything. They changed the rendering engine, so they had to really literally rewrite the whole game from scratch in a year. And they came up with new story. They came up, just everything changed. They built out new market systems. They built out new player systems. They built out a new job system. I mean, literally, it's a new game. And they kind of went that direction with the branding. So Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, literally, not only canonically, because at the end of what we will call 1.0, the original game, they had this giant war battle, and you see Bahamut, and it's like this moon is crashing into the planet, right? And then A Realm Reborn is 5 years later, and things have moved on, and now you're doing new things and other things and stuff like that. So and I said that we just had one of the greatest story expansions that we've ever had. Mm-hmm. It's literally been 7 years of story culminating into this big pivotal battle, and you learn so much about things that you've kind of been hinted at the entire time over a number of years. I don't cry at video games. All right, it's just I don't cry in general. I'm not a very weepy kind of person. But when I finished the story for the most recent expansion, I literally I just sat back in my chair listening to the music as the credits rolled up the screen, and I just had tears coming down my face. And my husband happened to walk in the door. He came home from work as this was happening, and I'm just nah, just go about your business. I'm fine. Just go. He's like, are you sure you're okay? And I'm like, no, it was just that good. It's not that it was sad. It's just, it was that good. And I would be remiss if I also didn't talk about the people and the friends that I have made over however many years. I have friends on Facebook that I played 11 with that I'm still in contact with. I have a Discord server for the people that I play 14 with. And I mean, we chat every day, about the most random things. What did you have for dinner, or somebody's kids, what they did in school, or just whatever, somebody's cat. We just talk about normal mundane things because we've ended up forming these friendships over however many years of playing this game together. I still will spend 6-7 hours a week playing this game, and I can't imagine that that's going to stop anytime soon.
So you mentioned this latest expansion seemed like kind of a culmination of all these things. Is this the end of the game? Do you think they're not going to release any more expansions, or do you think there's still room to go?
There's definitely still room to go. I mean, there are more story points that they left themselves that they can use for further expansions. It's what I would say. if they decided to not release any more expansions, I would be thrilled with the way they would leave it today. Like, I feel like if they ended it, like, this is a very satisfying point. Like, yes, there are other things. There are more places to go with the story. There are other things to wrap up. But if they decided that this was it, then it would be very satisfying. But we know for a fact that there are still more expansions coming. And I expect them to be hopefully just as good, if not better, than what this one was.
Cool. Well, yeah, again, this is another game that I've never played. I've seen a tiny amount of it, and it looks great, but I can not with this game, but with similar games, I can speak to that experience of like you make real connections and you form real relationships with these people, and that in a way that's disconnected from the game, but also in a way it's very connected to the game, and so it you tie those experiences with that game, and it just enhances the experience of playing that game and enjoying that game. So
Absolutely.
it sounds like Fixive, as I've heard it sometimes called, uh, is a pretty good MMO. I think that's what I'm getting from this conversation. All right,
It's all right.
we used up our 10 minutes. Let's rapid fire through these honorable mentions.
I think I kind of went over most of the honorable mentions already. I mean, Brave Fencer Musashi, Parasite Eve, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross. I mean, can't have one. I mean, I guess you could have one without the other, but I mean,
Yeah.
you're gonna miss out.
I am missing out.
I already mentioned Tetris, so I guess the only ones really left to mention are Legend of Dragoon, which it was a great game when I played it, and it was one of the only games I didn't have original discs for until last Christmas, and my husband found the original discs for me.
Wow.
So I now have a copy of the original colored discs. So that's I know you can't see it, but I have my entertainment center back over here, and it's actually on display in my entertainment center.
Wow.
The other two, Civ 5. I've sunk so many hours into Civ 5. I can't. That's another one. Like, that one I can actually track because I have it through Steam. I don't want to know how many hours.
And I will not ask you. I will not ask that of you.
I appreciate it. And then F-Zero GX. It's just that one. Kind of another guilty pleasure kind of game. I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I had a lot of fun playing it when I was a kid, and I'm sad that like there hasn't been a remake or a sequel of it anytime in recent history. And I don't have a GameCube anymore to be able to play, so a little sad.
Yep. Pour one out for the forgotten Nintendo franchises. I don't have any personal experience with F-Zero, but I know that it is a well-loved series and that people still want remakes or sequels or what have you. So, to F-Zero.
Hear us, Nintendo. You're missing out.
Yes, that's actually the whole purpose of this show, this podcast, is we're trying to get clout to convince Nintendo to make an F-Zero game. Come on! It's not going very well so far. Anyway.
No, not really. We can help though.
All right, we're an hour into the show, and we haven't gotten to the music yet, but that's great. That means we're having an awesome time. So let's dive into the main section, the big portion of the podcast. Let's talk about music. What a crazy thing for a video game orchestra to talk about. So I think we were talking about this before we went live. I should have realized how difficult a question this was, but I have asked Rachel to come up with 5 of her favorite pieces of video game music, and she tells me that this was an agonizing decision, which pretty much everyone I've interviewed has said this has been an agonizing decision. So I am sorry to put you through this pain, but let's celebrate with those that made the cut. What's the first piece of music that you want to share with us?
So the first one I want to share is Terra's theme from Final Fantasy VI. We have actually played this, or an arrangement of Terra's theme, in the orchestra, which isn't my favorite arrangement, although I do love this arrangement. It is a very broody, dark kind of song. But this particular arrangement is a piano only arrangement, and I fell in love. I don't even know if I can explain why. It's such a different take on the original song that it caught me by surprise, and I couldn't put it down.
All right, so let's listen to Terra's theme. This was originally composed by Nobuo Uematsu, and your notes mention that this piano arrangement is by Shiro Sato and performed by Moises Nieto.
I'm guessing that's how you say his name. I'm
the best I
sorry,
can.
I don't know.
Yeah. Here's Terra's theme. All right, I had to give it just a couple more seconds as it hit that really powerfully emotional section just at the minute 30 mark. Yeah, that is Terra's theme and a beautiful piano only arrangement by Shiro Sato, performed by Moises Nieto, who I'm sure Batulaphobe is going to correct me on the pronunciation the next time we get ice cream. Tell us a little bit about what about this arrangement and this performance really impacted you?
I don't know. It's so different from the original, and yet somehow it manages to convey almost the same kind of feelings that I get when listening to the original. I don't know. I have a very hard time unless you've listened to the original, or unless you've listened to like one of the heavier versions of this song. It's hard to describe just kind of like how light this particular piece feels, but still retains like that dark kind of quality to it. It's amazing. It's great. I love it. I don't know. I don't know that I can like go any more than just like it's that good, you know?
Yeah. Well, I can try and spit some words out and just kind of gush about it for a little bit, just for my thoughts.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think my original experience with this theme was again with our orchestra's arrangement of it, and I'm not sure if any recordings of our performances are on YouTube. I'm not sure if any of our concerts include that made it to YouTube. But if you listen to it, or if you find someone else performing that particular arrangement, it's very snare drum, marchy, heavy, and it has this very driving feel to it. And this, despite being the same musical content, could not be more different from that. And maybe it's just the fact that it's a solo piano arrangement and the piano's really good at doing this, but it feels so much more emotional and so much more tragic than the very marchy, heavy, adventurous theme. And it really conveys, I think, some of the tragedy that Terra feels in that game. And every version of this piece that I've heard is, I would say, faithful. You know, the version in the game served its purpose as an overworld theme very well. Just a hint of that darkness, but definitely encouraging you to keep going. You know, you can complete your mission. You can save the world. I won't go into details and spoilers and stuff. Our driving arrangement in the orchestra was just that much more so. Just, you know, that much more empowering while leaning into a little bit of that deep emotion and tragedy. And this just goes full on into the sadness of Terra and the events of Final Fantasy VI, and it does so in a very compelling way. So there's some word vomit for you.
I was gonna say, you did a much better job at that than I did. I'm just like, it's great, and you're like, dissertation on why it's great. Like, no, but that's like exactly like, you said everything that I couldn't articulate. Like, yes, it's so much more emotional than I think what the original was, and yes, I'm just gonna agree with you, and we're gonna go with your explanation because that was perfect.
All right, sounds good. I won't let that go to my head too much. All right, Terra's theme, really, really, really great piece of music and an excellent arrangement. What do we have next on our list to share with everyone?
Next up is the Zelda 25th Anniversary Overture. This is performed and I believe arranged by Video Games Live. Now, I'm kind of going to cap out here, and I didn't really play the Zelda games until Breath of the Wild came out. It wasn't something that I could get into. But this arrangement, like, I love it so much. It's so emotionally, even for somebody who didn't really play the game, is like, you can feel the emotion that these songs are meant to convey, and it's so powerful that I couldn't not put it on the list.
All right. Well, speaking as someone who does like a lot of Zelda, looking down at my username, you might be able to tell that. I can't wait to listen to this piece with you guys. So this is the Zelda 25th Anniversary Overture, the arrangement by Video Games Live, and I believe I haven't listened to the entire 5.5 minutes, but I believe it's using all material that was written by Koji Kondo. So we'll give Koji Kondo the accreditation for this. But here is the overture. As you may have figured out, I want to listen to the whole thing, but let's fade it down a little bit and talk about it. Zelda! Zelda's good! All right, you already briefly kind of touched on this, but let's go into a little bit more depth. Why does this make the cut? Why does this bear mentioning in your list of 5?
So it's not just because there's a flute in it.
Although that flute,
right? That trumpet line too, though. Like we seriously need. Like I know Lexi was saying in the chat, like we can have this arrangement. die, I think, if we ever got anything like even close to this piece. It's I don't know if it's the quality of the arrangement. I don't know if it's because I've actually seen this piece performed live. I've actually seen video games live probably like 3 or 4 times. So I've seen this piece at least once, and it moves you. Like, there's something about the way that it shifts from piece to piece, the way that each theme really gets its moment to shine. There have been times when I've been sitting in my car and I just stick this song on repeat because it makes you feel so good. It's very, for the most part, it's upbeat and happy and chirpy, and it has its like intense driving moments, and it's all over the place, and I don't know, I can't get enough of it. It's great.
Yeah. So far, I've heard pieces from Ocarina of Time, from the original Legend of Zelda. I heard a bit from Twilight Princess. Currently, we're listening to something from Wind Waker, so I think I needed to maybe give accreditation to more than just Koji Kondo. But Zelda has just this rich history of compelling music of all different flavors and types. And this arrangement is not one that I've heard before, but it's doing a masterful job of linking them all together and telling a coherent story with them all. So there's definitely something to be said for that as well. This is a piece that we played in the orchestra right here.
Yes.
This is back to Twilight Princess Overworld. So, gosh, Zelda is good, and I could, just like you could go for hours on Final Fantasy XIV, I can really go for hours on Zelda. We won't for the sake of time, and because, again, this is your interview, not mine. But, gosh, Zelda music is so powerful and so meaningful to me. Now, you said that you kind of, your first introduction to the series was Breath of the Wild. Is there music from that game that you like? I'm not going to go out and search for it and play it, but maybe just to give a quick shout out or something.
I don't know that there really is anything that I can point to that I was like, oh yeah, like that's great from Breath of the Wild. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I don't know if Breath of the Wild being the first game that I really played, like purposefully and kept with it, makes any difference. But I don't know that any of it really strikes me the way that some of the earlier music does, even never having played the earlier games.
Yeah, definitely a lot to be said about kind of the different approaches to music and the different feelings of the music, but that is a whole other podcast. Zoom forward to a month from now when I get interviewed.
Your whole interview is just going to be Zelda music. You know that, right?
Well, I'm the one writing the agenda, so I'm going to have 50 songs, and there's going to be Zelda, there's going to be Metroid, there's going to be... Anyway, that's for a later time. All right, so let us move on from Zelda for tonight. What is the third piece that you would like to share with us tonight?
So this might be a little bit of a weird pick. This is a Final Fantasy XIV piece. This is called The Dark Which Illuminates the World. It's actually a theme for a particular town city called the Crystarium. A lot of towns and cities have a differing day theme and a night theme, and this is the day theme. And I'll explain a little bit why I like this after we hear it.
Okay. So this is The Dark Which Illuminates the World, or I think I took the first title you listed here, Crystarium Theme Day, and this was composed by Masayoshi Soken. Here we go. Well, yes, please. I'll take 5. Uh, what a what a really regal and triumphant piece. This was the Crystarium theme, or the dark which illuminates the world, from Final Fantasy XIV, and wow, I really like that one. So
and it's funny because you turned it down right before you get into this great little piano flute kind of like little melody duet. Oh, it's I could just sit in the Crystarium all day and just listen to this music, and it would be great. It would be the best thing in the world. So it. I don't want to give too much of the story away because this is the Crystarium is a place that shows up in the most recent expansion.
Okay.
So it's not some place that's been around for years and years and years. It's literally like maybe a year old at this point. And you have found yourself, as usual, in a dire situation, and you walk into this town or this city. I don't see whether it's like a city or a town. Like, it feels very small, like a city. It's not very spread out, but it's up. It goes up. It's a multi-level city, and you have this giant, massive, blue, glittering crystal tower in this city. And coming into this town, you feel like this is kind of like what hope feels like. Everything around you is just the worst, and you come into this town, and your friends are there, and it's just, it is so good. And I think part of it too is that it feels much more than just like a city theme or a town theme. Like, a lot of the times when you're in a city or a town, it's very pretty music, but I don't know that many of the other areas have something that's like this, like you said, regal feeling, that's this built up musically. It's great. I love it. And the other thing that I love too is that it's hard to pick it out unless you've heard the other pieces, but this song contains some of the themes and melodies of other songs that come from a very pivotal point in this expansion.
Yeah, and I mean, just here, I think I'm hearing the main Final Fantasy overture theme.
Yep.
Quoted
yeah,
as well,
they snuck that in there too.
So good on them. Yeah, I mean, credit both to the music and credit to you. As soon as you mentioned a crystal tower, I immediately get this very vivid, clear picture of at least what I imagine this town looks like, and it's majestic, and it's beautiful, and gosh, the music is doing such a good job at lending to that image. I almost want to just go Google some screenshots of what does the Crystarium look like and see how close it matches my mental image. But it just looks, in my mind's eye, it looks incredible. Yeah, that is quite an impressive piece. From how it begins with just that very powerful kind of low percussion, the soaring brass that I think Petulafo mentioned in our Twitch chat here. Yeah, I'll take 5 Crystariums, please. Just have those delivered to my front door. That'd be perfect. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, if this is the kind of music that permeates Final Fantasy XIV, I sure wouldn't mind spending a few $100s in it.
Maybe you should give it a shot.
My MMO itch is scratched by Guild Wars 2, and I haven't played Guild Wars 2 in a while. I don't know if I'm looking to lose 1,000 hours of my life to another game, but if it's
a commitment, I'll admit. Very
if
much.
I ever want to, Final Fantasy XIV's on the short list. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about another piece of music here. What is next on our list?
So next is Big Blue from F-Zero. It's the 8-bit big band arrangement.
All right, so this one, you sent me a link that started about 10 seconds in.
Yes.
And unfortunately, when I downloaded it as an MP3, I wasn't able to download just the bit after the 10 seconds. So we're going to get a bit of an intro, and then I'll let it play for 90 seconds after that. But here is the 8-Bit Big Band's arrangement of Big Blue, and I looked up and credited who the composers were on F-Zero, and I've forgotten. So we'll see in the text as it gets accredited. Here is Big Blue with, remember, a 10-second intro.
Yes!
All right, there's just a little bit of the 8-Bit Big Band's arrangement of Big Blue, and I'm going to keep it looping in the background underneath us, so if you hear someone very excitedly say, yes! Not only is that the intro to this song, but it's also my reaction to this piece. Rachel, tell us a little bit about Big Blue and why you chose this particular arrangement.
It's so punchy. I love it. I mean, I said before, F-Zero GX, loved playing those games as a kid, to the point where like you actually have 2 tracks in Mario Kart 8 on the Switch that have music from F-Zero or arrangements of music from F-Zero, and like I will play those tracks repeatedly just so that I can listen to the music. I love the 8-Bit Big Band arrangement of this. Their arrangements are very unique. Their whole thing is taking on like a jazzy kind of reimagining to their arrangements. And Grace Kelly, she is the person who you hear on the sax, is phenomenal. She's so talented. Like I anything that she plays, like I can't. It's great. But this song, like, you get the jazz bits, but you also get, like, this rock undertone, not even, like, an undertone. Like, there are some sections that just feel like straight-up rock, and others that feel, like, straight-up jazzy. Like, it's all over the place, and it's fast, and it's just, like, you want to get up and move. Like, I have a hard time, like, right now just sitting in my chair, just moving in the back, because I just want to go, it's great. And the ending to it is just so satisfying. Like it resolves, and it's like, I don't know. Like I could just
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Captain Falcon.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah. I think the video title called it the jazz metal arrangement, and
that's a good, there you go. And I don't know that I get the metal impression so much. Maybe I just don't listen to enough metal music. I get more of a rock feeling from it, but yeah.
Barx Music in our chat says, I didn't know Grace Kelly was part of that band. I I probably know the least about the 8-Bit Big Band, but I think this did say it was featuring Grace Kelly, and I probably should have mentioned on here featuring Grace Kelly in my accreditation. So that is my fault. I'll take the blame there. I don't know if she's a regular member of the 8-Bit Big Band, but it seems like at the very least she was featured in this one. And yeah, my first time listening to Big Blue was, I think, on the Big Blue stage in Super Smash Bros. Melee. And I had never played, and I still have never played an F-Zero game, but I was like, whoa, this music! It's so happy, it's so fun. Like you said early on, it's so punchy. That's a really good descriptor that I hadn't thought of before. I love, and this is such a like basic thing, but I love when music has like a really big sound, and then it pulls back and there's silence for a beat afterwards. And this has it in those big but up. Oh, just great use of negative space to just build that anticipation. Exactly what's happening right here. I've always liked that about this piece. It's so exciting. It's so happy. It's so driving. And pun slightly intended. It seems great for a racing game. It seems like it'd be very exciting. Like, I can't wait to pull out of this turn, jam on the accelerator, and pull past. Or however this game works. I know it's like futuristic as well, so I don't know. But the Big Blue sounds awesome.
I actually got to see them 8-Bit Big Band live before COVID. They had like 1 or 2 performances in New York City, and so my husband and I went up there, and we were in this tiny little, I don't even know what it was, like, it's not a bar, but it wasn't like it's not a typical concert place or whatever have you. They had like this super tiny little stage, and they had like everybody up there. Everybody was so, like, the performers were getting into it so much, like, as they were playing. Like, it was an amazing experience because they were so happy to be playing that you were happy not only just to be watching them play, but like you were happy because they were happy, and everything was just this great experience feeding off of each other. It was great. Like, I can't, if you ever get the chance, once COVID is over and done with, if you can go see 8-Bit Big Band, like 100% go do it.
Yeah. Gosh, I've never seen them in person, and now I want to. Could we please have a vaccine? Could we please have some...
Yes, please.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, Big Blue, 8-Bit Big Band, good stuff. All right, before we get another yes, let me kill the music here. And let's move on to our last piece. So, what is the last piece that we're going to talk about tonight?
So this last piece is another Final Fantasy XIV piece. This is called Invincible. It's from the final fight from the latest expansion, from the Hades fight. And similar to how the towns have like a day theme and a night theme, the way that boss battles, so to speak, they call them trials in 14. The way that these trials work is they are usually kind of heavily choreographed. So you kind of know what things are coming, and the way that you approach these fights is you learn where to move, when to move, what's incoming, get out of the way kind of stuff. But they're also broken up into phases. So a lot of times, like, you'll have the first phase and you'll do a lot of stuff, and then there'll be a small break. And then you'll get into the second phase and you'll do a bunch of things, and either you'll kill off whatever boss you're trying to kill, or you'll go into like another phase. So this is the phase 2 theme of the Hades fight.
Right. So here we go with the Hades theme or the phase 2 Hades theme from Final Fantasy XIV, and this was again composed by Masayoshi Soken. right, that is just a sampler of Phase 2 of the Hades theme from Final Fantasy XIV. This one is, once again, you're 5 for 5 on good pieces of music. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't think anyone shared a piece of music that I've disliked on this. But there are parts of this that remind me of my favorite things about the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, of all things. But before I spit out and word vomit about the things I like about this piece, why don't you tell us what you like about this piece, the Hades theme Part 2, or I'm going to screw up the title probably a dozen times since I talked about this. What do you like about this music?
So it's the Phase 1 music that comes before this is very dirge-like. It's very solemn, very dark, very heavy, very slow with rock-ish undertones. And you really feel like the despair and the sadness going into this particular fight. And then you get your little break, and Phase 2 hits, and it's a very different feeling. Like, you're still feeling the pressure of having to win this fight, and you still feel the sadness because understanding things that you have come to realize about the person that you're fighting. It's a very impactful, and you kind of don't want to do it, but you know that it needs to be done. But you also get that big hoping, that violin run, like right before you fade it out, like that violin run that goes through it. This part right here where you get like the bright brass underneath that's like elevating the whole piece up. It's hope and despair, and you can't lose, but you don't want to win. You're doing the thing that needs to be done because it has to be done, because if you don't, more bad things are going to happen. And again, I can't give too much away because this is from the most recent expansion. Although, I suppose since it's almost a year old at this point, I mean, if you're going to play it, you probably have already played it. So I guess it's on you if you haven't. But you don't want to do it. If there was any other way than to go into this battle, if there's any other way of fixing things, you would do it. But your back is up against the wall. You don't have a choice. You have to go through with this. Which is not unique, but you don't come across that even in Final Fantasy XIV a lot. Like there's a lot of boss fights and a lot of trials and stuff where you're like, okay, yeah, this is sad, or yeah, I wish there was a different way to do this. But I think this is really, the storytelling was so good at this point that you really start to empathize with the quote-unquote bad guy or who's been your adversary for the past however many years. And in the beginning, he was just some rando bad guy, and him and his buddies were just contributing to bad stuff. And then over this past expansion, they are humanized. You learn their story, you understand their motivations, and now you have come to this point where your only choice is to go into this battle and win. And again, it's such an emotional experience that every time I go into this fight and every time like this music picks up, like it's hard to just not feel your heart just get quicker and just feel the moment and the heaviness and everything that moment means. I couldn't not put this on the list. I know saying that it's meaningful probably doesn't mean much to people who haven't actually played this fight, but or or gone through this part of the story, but it really is like it's such a well-crafted piece for that pivotal moment in the story. Everything just comes together in just this really rich way. It just I'm in love. Absolutely love.
I mean, I don't have the experience of playing this game, but the music says in notes and rhythms and chords what you are saying with your words. You know, the thing I was thinking of as we listened to the first section of it was, you know, the main feeling I got from it was a feeling of desperation. Like, you know, it has all come to this. We have to win now, or something bad is going to happen, right? It's and that's a feeling that I think comes across in a lot of boss themes. Can come across in a lot of boss themes, a lot of like movie soundtracks as well, because it's a common theme. But this is one of the better renditions of that feeling that I've heard. This kind of everything is on the line, last desperate hope. You know, it's us heroes against this adversary, and we're the only thing standing between it and the bad stuff. And to hear your explanation of how, you know, there's an element of tragedy to this that didn't come across immediately in the music, but as you explain that, I definitely hear that as well. This idea that, like, you've come to empathize a bit with the person that you have no choice but to defeat, or the group. I don't know, person, group, something. the opposing force. So yeah. I mean, I don't have the personal experience of how this matches up with the game, but just listening to the music, this is really, really good, and I can see how, matched with the story that you describe is so impressive, I can see that being just a really good pairing, like peanut butter and jelly, like something that fits together very well with something else. I don't know. I'm having trouble coming up with other metaphors. And so,
I mean,
you know,
Yoshi P and Soken can be a metaphor in and of themselves.
There you go.
For those that don't know, Yoshi P is the director of Final Fantasy XIV now. He's the one that brought in and saved the game. And Soken has done 90%, I think, at this point, of the music for the game. So you stick the two of them together, they're their own metaphor. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Gosh, yeah, that's a really good piece. And again, this, like all of these pieces, all of the particular arrangements or performances that Rachel picked out are longer than 90 seconds. And they are definitely, like, just from what I've been hearing in the background as we talk, they're all worth going and finding on YouTube or Spotify or whatever you want to use. Go check them out, because they're well worth your full attention and your full listen. Cool. Well, thank you so much for picking out all those pieces of music to share with us. Let's move on to the final section of our interview, what we have been calling the instrument petting zoo. And Rachel, I believe you have not one, not two, but maybe 4 different instruments that you're going to show off for us. So what are you going to show off for us?
So there are technically 4 different instruments, but they're all the same family of instrument. So like I said at the very beginning, I'm primarily a flautist or a flutist. And so I have 4 of my flutes here to share with you. I guess we will go smallest to largest, and then we will kind of go back in time.
All right, fair enough. So what's up first?
So this is the flute that everybody kind of is familiar with. It's the concert flute. It's what children in 3rd grade play. It's what professional flautists play in most orchestras. More people are familiar. Well, I guess maybe not more familiar, but if people know the flute, they know its smaller cousin, the piccolo. I don't have a piccolo. I don't like the high-pitched instruments, I suppose you could say. But I started on this instrument. I'm most familiar with this instrument. I'm probably most proficient at this instrument, but I find it a little boring because almost all flute players, well, I won't say all, but most flute players will play this flute. So we will go with something larger.
Okay, I like bigger.
We'll
Ooh,
go with this flute. This is the alto flute. It is, as you can tell, curved at the top. And I know it's a little hard to tell, but the pipe the instrument makes or is made of is much larger than the regular flute. And I guess to actually illustrate that, I will take this one apart too. So this is the standard flute, and this is the alto flute.
it's almost like a half-time larger, I guess.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
estimating from my video.
you can fit one inside the other, so
Yeah,
it's sizably larger.
Matryoshka flutes.
Yeah, uh, it is not. The range is slightly different. So since it has a longer tube and the tube is bigger, it has a lower sound than the concert flute, but not a full octave lower. So these flutes actually overlap each other quite a bit.
Okay.
This one has a range that's lower than the traditional concert flute, and the traditional concert flute can play higher notes than this one can. There comes a point where in the overlap, you actually don't want to play the notes on this instrument because they are better covered by the concert flute. The tone that is produced is a more pleasing tone where they can sound a little shrill on this instrument. And then we'll pull out the big guns. I don't know that I can get this instrument entirely in frame, but
We'll
I will
do our
try.
best.
I have to go like this.
Oh boy. Look at that absolute unit. In awe of that lad.
Yeah, so this is a bass flute. There are two different versions of bass flute. There's the standing bass and the horizontal, and this one is standing. And what that means is there's an extra curve at this point right here so that the instrument stands like this. You can hold the instrument like this and play it, whereas the horizontal bass flute does not have this curve, and you'll actually hold it out to the side as you play. Let me make sure I don't knock anything over. Hold it out to the side to play like a traditional flute.
So the horizontal one, I guess, would look a little bit more like the alto flute that you just showed, with just sort of the
Yes.
single bed, but
Yes.
larger.
Yes. With the horizontal bass flute, it actually comes with what they call a crutch. And this is a piece that will attach somewhere on the body of the flute. So usually like right about right here at this point. And you can think of it as like a stick that's attached to a upside down U or a lowercase n. And what that'll do is that will rest on top of your leg, so that your leg will be supporting the weight of the instrument, instead of you trying to hold it with your arms, because it's solid metal. I mean, it's a pretty hefty. I mean, granted, it's not heavy like a tuba or something like that, but at least with a tuba, like, you can rest part of the weight on your body, whereas with this, you're supporting it entirely with your arms, and holding something out to the side like this is kind of tiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I really thought was tiring, because it doesn't look like it should be tiring. But anyone who doesn't believe it, hold something even moderately heavy, like a water bottle or something, out at arm's length for more than 5 minutes, and you will be amazed at how tiring it is. So I absolutely believe that this instrument could give you a workout.
Yep. So the bass flute is an octave lower than the concert flute. If you read music, it's actually written exactly the same as the concert flute. It just sounds an octave lower. You don't read the music an octave lower. Which can sometimes, if you first pick up the bass flute, it can sometimes be a little confusing because you're used to a certain pitch being a certain note on the sheet music. And then you pick up this and you're looking at that certain note and it doesn't match what's in your head as you play it. You have to make that adjustment. I know for some people who play multiple instruments, like I said, I also play the tenor sax and stuff like that, which kind of has the same thing. The tenor sax is a transposing instrument, kind of has the same thing. You have a tone in your head, your fingers go in a certain way, but what the sound produced is different than what you're expecting. If you're coming from typically playing a concert C instrument. So this instrument, I would say, is only good for about 2 octaves. Okay. Once you start going higher than that, it gets very shrill and unpleasing to listen to. And that's when you would very much be covered by using a regular concert flute. So this does really, really well in the low registers. But as I said way back an hour and a half ago, because it's so low and because this instrument is so big, the sound doesn't project very far. It's a very soft sound. So unless you have multiple bass flutes, or unless you're having a microphone of some sort near the bass flute, or it's not going to be a very good orchestral instrument. You're going to want to use it in flute choirs or in small ensembles where you can dial back the sound of the other instruments and really let the bass flute itself shine through. So I can't, like, I've been playing this thing for like 2 years now. Sometimes like even I can't get over like the sheer size of just how big it is. I know I showed you a size comparison of the other 2 instruments, so I will do that with this one.
All right, I can't wait to see how much larger it is than the alto flute, which was already that much larger than the concert flute.
So this is how big the bass flute is, and this is how big the alto flute is. And all of these flutes. I mean, this is, so the flute can be broken up into 3 parts: the head joint, the body, and the foot joint. They all contain the same keys. So each foot joint across the instrument will contain the same keys. The body will contain the same keys. The head joint doesn't contain any keys. It just contains the mouth plate or the lip plate. So this is the width. Has three keys of your regular concert flute. The alto isn't much longer, right? It's only slightly.
Yeah,
slightly bigger.
Guessing a centimeter from this video interface might be bigger. That's a big boy. That's a big flute.
Yeah. But yeah, like I love playing it just because it's such a unique instrument. It's one of those instruments like that's going to make people stop and go like, "Oh my God, what is that? That's so cool!" Even if they know nothing about flutes, like it's just something that just catches people's attention. And if they do know something about flutes, they're like, "Oh my gosh, is that a bass flute?" Like we went to MagFest, and we actually played in the hallway at MagFest, as you do.
Busking at MagFest, let's go.
Exactly. And I brought my bass flute because why not? They also have like a bunch of different jam sessions and stuff you can do, and it was great having the bass flute there because people who know things about music and know what it is just like, oh, that's so cool. Oh, can I play that? Like, and being able to show it off to people and have them understand what it is a really, really neat experience. So I guess at this point we'll kind of go back in time a little bit.
Okay.
So as you might have picked up on, those 3 flutes all kind of look the same. They're all a metal body. They all kind of have the same keys. I know that I didn't, really point it out that much. I'll put the alto back together, and I'll put the concert flute back together. Just real quick so that you can see that even though the keys are shaped a little differently, they're pretty much the same keys in the same place. You've got this key here is the same as this key down here. They're, for all intents and purposes, same keys, same relative position.
Yeah.
That's a relatively modern invention. I want to say probably the mid to late 19th century.
Okay.
Which in the history of music, I mean, is relatively recent.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I have is an early to mid 19th century flute. And right off the bat, you can see a couple differences. One is that this is made of wood. It's not made of metal. And two is that there's there's not really any keys. And I know that the camera doesn't pick it up very well, but there are holes in the body of the flute.
Yeah, I think we're barely seeing some of that come through.
Awesome. The other thing is that even though you see this joint here, this is a false joint. So from my finger down is what is considered the foot joint on a modern flute. On this older flute, the foot joint and the body are all one piece. Okay. So way back, Renaissance time.
We'll add in the wavy lines effect as we go back to the Renaissance here. We'll fix that in post.
Exactly. We're not doing this live. What do you flutes didn't have any keys at all. They had no keys. They played a D major scale. If all you did was just lift your fingers up one by one. You could play chromatically by halfway covering the tone holes with your fingers. So you have a tone hole, it's open if it's uncovered, it's closed if you put your finger over it, or you can halfway cover. And I know that doesn't come across on the camera. You're just going to have to trust me that it's only halfway covered.
Believe in the power of the flute.
So one of the first things that they did was they added this little E key. So now we've gone from no keys to one key. And then they went from one key to 3 to 4 to 5. And it kind of settled around 8. Now, with 8 keys, you now have what's called a simple system flute. And it's called that to differentiate it from the earlier medieval style flutes and the modern flutes that come after it. And there was a big period of experimentation in the mid 19th century, which is really, really cool. I won't really get into it. But what's unique about these instruments is that there are keys on this instrument that no longer exist, that they decided were not necessarily useless, but there were better ways of doing things. So one of the major things, there's this guy, and his name is Theobald Boehm. And if you know about flutes or some other instruments, you may be familiar with like the Boehm fingering system or Boehm keys. This guy basically looked at flutes and was like, there's got to be a better way to make this thing. Because what would happen is you would have flute players in one section of the city sounding different from flute players in another section of the city, because the intonation of the individual instruments was hard to control. This instrument, and I know it's not very apparent, is wider at the top than it is at the bottom.
It comes through a little bit in the video.
It's called a conical bore flute, and it means exactly what it sounds like. It's shaped like a cone on the inside. These tone holes, depending on whatever flute you have from the era, are different sizes. They have different spaces. There were multiple different ways to put your fingers across the keys and the tone holes to produce the same kind of sound, depending on whose flute that you were playing. So if you were a flute player back in the day, you both had to know all of these alternate fingerings, the forked fingerings, the half fingerings, and you had to know your instrument and know the best way to get that sound out of your instrument. And if you ever switched to a different instrument, it's a whole new learning curve. There wasn't a lot of consistency. So Boehm did a lot of research. He did a lot of study. He consulted a lot of people who knew things about sound and acoustics and physics and stuff like that. And eventually, he started to make his own flutes. I mean, granted, he already made simple system flutes, but he started to add things to the design. He started to add more keys. He started to play around with the spacing of the tone holes on the instrument. He started to play around with the size of the inside of the flute. And eventually, around the mid-late 19th century, we settled on pretty much what we use today. They switched from using wood instruments to using metal because it was easier to get a consistent size and shape out of the metal. Like wood, like I know you can't see it on this one, but right here along this head joint, there's a crack because wood reacts with humidity and moisture and temperature. And so a lot of these early flutes were prone to cracking. And you could get them repaired, but they may never sound the same. So in an effort to correct a lot of these problems, he's like, well, why don't we use metal? And then he went from doing a metal body to putting more keys on the instrument and taking some keys off. And eventually we found like this happy place that we've been using for the past 100-something years. Which, I mean, I do a really bad job of explaining like all the different variations, but I mean, there are flutes that have almost 2 keys for every single note that you could possibly play on a flute, which I know without context doesn't sound like much, but that's insane. Like, that is a ridiculous number of keys on the instrument. Like, I don't even understand how you could play it because every single time you put your finger somewhere, you're going to be hitting some other key that you don't intend to hit.
Right.
So it's a little crazy to me that we went through this whole experimentation phase. It's also interesting because the French picked up the modern Bohème style almost immediately. The Germans and the English held on to their wooden simple system flutes for much longer. So depending on where you were living, would kind of influence like the kind of flutes that you had available to you. But by the end of the 19th century, everybody had kind of really, not everybody, but most places had transitioned over to using the French style Bohème flute. The other thing that's kind of cool is, I mean, it's been the gold standard, you know, for however long. We haven't really had that many improvements on it. There are maybe 2 major improvements I can think of in the past 20-something years. And they're nothing as influential as what Bohème did for the modern flute. Like the more, there's like a new padding technique. So on flutes, on the modern flutes, underneath the keys, and I know you won't be able to see these because they're so tiny. But if you can see this yellow bit underneath the key, every single key has that yellow bit, and that yellow bit is called a pad, and that pad seals the little metal hole. So instead of, on the old flutes, you would use the pads of your fingers. On the modern flutes, you can put your fingers on the keys, but the pads are going to be the ones that are going to be sealing those tone holes in order to produce the sound. Like there's been some advancements in the materials that we use for those. There's been some advancements in like some of the key work along this back rod here. And all of these keys, so there's two main rods on the flute, and all of the keys that are on the flute are attached. I say all, most of the keys that are on the flute are attached to these two rods. So there's been like minor improvements into how those rods and stuff function, but nothing so drastic. The modern flute has basically eliminated the need for alternate fingerings. Forked fingerings are basically non-existent. You only use like covering the tone holes halfway, if you can even do it on some flutes. Some flutes you can't do it. On other flutes, you only do them if you're going for like some weird microtonal kind of music, really esoteric kind of stuff. So it's not something that you really come across anymore. And that was kind of his whole point, was we want to take something that's really complicated and convoluted to play because you need all of this extra knowledge, and we want to make it easier. We want to reduce the barrier to entry. So we do still have alternate fingerings, but you can get by 98% of the time with what you learn in 3rd and 4th grade if you start music that early. The basic fingerings, you can get by for a very, very long time with those. It also, it takes out of the equation the size of your fingers and the size of the tone holes. Like, I have a very difficult time playing my historical flute because my fingers are so far apart. Whereas on the modern flute, like, this is a very comfortable position. This is how you hold the modern flute. My fingers naturally fall into this position. There's no stretching. It's not uncomfortable. If I'm trying to hold this instrument, I mean, it's spaced. It may not look like that much on video, but this is much more uncomfortable. There's much more space in between my fingers on this instrument than there is on the other one. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my historical flutes. I'm probably going to own more historical flutes at some point. I want to get some of those weird, intermediate, experimental flutes that aren't practical to play, but they're just cool to look at.
Yeah. Set up like a visual collection at home or something. Or you display
Exactly. Get nice shadow boxes, hang them on the wall. But I'm very thankful for the modern flute. If I had to play the historical flute in the orchestra day in and day out, I'm not sure that I could. I might have quit before I even began.
Sorry, Barak Music. I think she's saying no to your proposition that you play that in the orchestra from now on. I think we're just I'm just gonna say no on that. All right. So first of all, thank you so much for that sort of in-depth look at the flute, the history of flutes, and the variety of flutes. Can you pick? Okay, I won't say pick your favorite flute, but I will say, can you pick a flute to maybe play us a few notes, play us a scale, show us maybe how some of the buttons act and how they change, how the pitch happens?
Yeah. We'll see if I have any embouchure left after talking for 2 hours and 2 minutes.
2 hours, yeah. I think this is going to be the longest interview we've had yet, and I'm here for it. Literally, I'm here for it.
Not a record I wanted, but one that I'm happy to have.
You know what? It happened. It happened naturally.
All right, so I'm only going to play what sounds kind of good on this instrument. I'm going to try to not play the bad sounds. We'll see how it goes. And you'll have to let me know if this is too loud or not.
All right.
Or too quiet, because it is a low instrument, so we'll see.
We'll play it by ear.
Oh dear. What's the sound quality on that?
I think your microphone decided that was noise and it cut it out, so that it might have been too low.
All right.
but yeah, we didn't hear very much at all. So I guess
Uh,
try
what,
projecting a little bit more if that's possible. See if we can get a little bit more sound out of it. I'm guessing
what
here.
did
I'm
what did I just tell you about the low instruments? Come on, man. All right, I'm just gonna go with it. Whatever you hear, and if you hear nothing, well, then I can't help you.
well, then fill it in with your imagination.
Exactly.
Right? We heard most of that scale.
Okay, cool. Once
Yeah.
you get higher than that, you don't want to play it on this instrument. That's when you would want to switch to the concert flute because it gets a little crunchy.
Yeah. So, I'm not very well versed in flutes and the variety of flutes, but I would say that does sound like it's a little bit lower of a scale than I would say is, I'm used to from a I guess I'd call it a regular flute, but to be as technical as possible, a concert flute, right?
You could call it a regular flute. I mean, I'm not going to judge you, so.
I know there are people on the internet who will judge me, so but yeah, that's a cool sound. And then unfortunately, I'm assuming that the bass flute is probably just going to have that much of a harder time coming through. But do you want to give that a shot? I don't know if you have the
Sure.
stand with you to be able to hold it properly.
It's okay. It's only for a short time, and it's in front of me, so it's not so
No,
bad.
actually, I have a schedule for another half hour of this. So once again, sarcasm, everyone. Wow. Yeah, that sure is a bass flute. Wow. Kind of impressed. You've played this. I've been there when you've played this before, but I think this is the first time I sort of sat down and really said like, I'm going to listen to that instrument. What does it sound like? And wow, it's surprisingly low for a flute, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
cool.
And that's the. No, I'm not going to play Journey. Brian is asking for me to play Journey on the bass flute.
Maybe some
Maybe
other
if
time,
we play Journey in the orchestra, we can bring that back.
and maybe if
Uh,
Brian comes up to conduct for us.
uh,
Okay.
maybe when we do one of the recitals, maybe in that case I'll pull it out. I'll do some sort of flute arrangement of Journey or something,
Yeah,
or
that'd
get
be cool.
Sam and Steven to play along or something.
Collaboration. Let's go. All
Exactly.
right. So, I think I'm going to ask one more final question, and then maybe as you answer this, if anyone in chat has any questions that they want to ask, even if it's "Can you play Journey on bass flute?" and the answer is no, uh, go ahead and ask those. But Rachel, my last question is: what made you choose the flute? What drew you to that instrument?
I didn't have a choice. So I originally wanted to play violin as a kid, and I don't come from a well-off family.
Okay.
So my parents were kind of like, no, we don't have the money for you to play violin. And so we went to um, the sort of like pick your elective thing in third grade. And I was like, okay, well, I'll do band. I'll play some kind of music because I don't know if you can tell, I'm not a sporty kind of person. Never was a sporty kind of person. I just can't I like watching sports, but
Mhm.
I like playing sports. So I was like, all right, I'll try out this whole music band thing even if I can't play violin. And I don't want to say that I was like banned from playing like the brass instruments. Um, but I come from a time and I come from a region that was kind of like really like a socioeconomic background that gender roles were heavily enforced. Um, and brass instruments were kind of seen as a masculine kind of instrument. So if I had my choice, like I would have picked like trombone. Like I thought trombone was really cool. Um, but I kind of didn't have a choice. And I was kind of like, okay, you get to play flute or you get to play clarinet. Um, and that was really kind of my only choice.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like a coin flip. And I'm like, all right, I'll play the flute because it seemed easier than playing the clarinet. I'm not sure what, my third grade me was thinking when I thought that. Um, but yeah, so that's how I ended up with the flute. Um, I ended up playing all through middle school, grade school, middle school, high school. Um, and I did not pursue music once I left high school. I actually went about 10 years without playing music. Um, and for the longest time, I thought that playing music was behind me. I had kept the flute that I got when I was in high school. We were a little better off, and I ended up getting a semi professional instrument. And I kept it. And every couple of years, I would kind of pull it out of the closet and I would clean it up and take it in for an adjustment and just make sure it was taken care of. But there was nothing in my brain that was like, yeah, you're going to play music again because I'm not super interested in like traditional orchestral music.
Mhm.
That's just not my jam. And a lot of community orchestras, that's what they trend towards. Unless you happen to end up with like a really cool orchestra that plays video game music or cinematic music or stuff like that. So um, I kept it, but I never really thought that I would play music again. And I know I tell this story every single time that I am interviewed for the NGSO. So if you've heard this before, I'm sorry. You're gonna hear it again. You're gonna hear it again in the future. Um, but my husband and I went to go see video games live, and this is like our third time seeing it or something like that. And it was a very emotional moment for me. And I don't even remember what song they were performing or what piece they were performing, and I'm just like I'm starting to cry a little bit, and my husband's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm okay." He's like, "No, really, like, are you okay?" And I'm just like, "I want to be up there doing that, but I'm not a professional musician. I know that I'm not on video games live level, like not even close, not in a million years." And then it would be another 2 or 3 years before the NGSO would even be formed. Um, but I think that's one of the reasons why when I saw that post on Reddit, I'm like, yeah, this is creepy. It's weird. 6 p.m. Norwalk, some library, like I don't parking lot. Okay. Uh, but that's why I took the chance and I went. Um, and I'm immensely grateful to the orchestra. I am a very different person today because of all the people that I know through the orchestra. I'm a better musician. For a long time, I considered myself a one-trick pony, in the sense that like I played the concert flute. That was it. I was always in awe of people who could play multiple instruments. And here I am 5 years later. I've got three more flutes that I have. I started violin lessons. I play the violin now. I bought a harp. I play tenor sax. Like I never thought that this was something that I was capable of, and I'm so grateful to be elevated by the people in the orchestra and that they push me to be a better musician. Even if, my goal is not to be a professional musician, and a lot of people in the orchestra are professional musicians or they teach music or they their lives revolve around music in a way that mine doesn't. But I'm very lucky that I get to have the orchestra as a source of both something to be better at in terms of like music, but also the people that I get to be with. They really make me want to be a better musician and a better person, and they're just a lot of fun to be around too. Like they're great. Like they're not just people that are in an orchestra with me. Like they are legit my friends. And I think that's something really special.
Yeah. So everyone, force your children to play an instrument, and then they can have experiences like this. I saw one question from I think this is Brian in the chat. How much harder or how much more air support does each flute get as it goes up in size?
A lot harder. Just because there's so much instrument and so much metal to push your air. So, quick physics lesson: you don't. In most instruments, you are forcing your air through the instrument. So, like if you play a clarinet or a brass instrument, you're taking your airstream and pushing it through an instrument. With a flute, you're actually blowing across the lip plate.
Right.
Much like if you've ever taken a soda bottle and blown across the top of a soda bottle, that's exactly how you play the flute.
I don't have a soda bottle near me.
So because of that, you lose your air more quickly the longer that flute tube becomes. Just because it takes so much air to get those low sounds out. I think the first time that I played my bass flute, like I did like a 4 count at like 60 and was already out of breath. Like it was such a drastic change. The alto flute is much easier. I don't notice a big difference between the concert flute and the alto, but then again, I got my alto after I got my bass, so it could just be that I worked up my lungs before I got my alto, so I found it easier to play. But yeah, no, it takes a lot of air, and if you're not careful, I know even now, depending on the piece, like if I'm not conscious of like where I'm breathing and how often I'm breathing, I can get lightheaded just trying to get enough oxygen into my lungs and out again because you're just going through so much air.
Well, all right. I think I'm out of questions. And I
You're
think
out
the
of questions.
chat's
I'm out of breath. Like,
you're out of
hey, we're
breath,
done with
and
this
we're just.
marathon here.
I think we're ready to end here.
Yeah,
Rachel, had a great time. I hope you
me
have as
too.
well.
Yeah,
It was really awesome talking about video games and talking about music with you, and talking about your history as a person and with the NGSO. And I've said this for everyone, but I really do mean it for everyone. I'm really happy that you're in the orchestra, and then I get to know you, and that get to hang out with you and play music with you, and get dinner and get ice
yeah.
cream in the freezing cold, and play outdoor concerts with drunk bagpipers.
Oh my goodness.
So,
They lined up pretty well, okay? We did a good job being in tempo with that.
oh gosh, that's a story for a different time. If anyone doesn't know that one, but yes, you have officially beaten Ben's record as the longest interview. And
I'm
I
sorry,
think
Ben.
I think that is where we'll call it. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone for watching this. If you're watching this live, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to jump over to some of the other videos. Go catch up on the rest of the Choose Your Character series. This is, if I'm correct, the 6th in this entry, and we've got more to come. If you're more interested in the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra, again, our YouTube channel is a great place to find out a little bit more about some of our past performances, meet some of the other members. If you would like information about how to join our website, it's down in that corner. It's below Rachel over there. Go ahead and click that. Well, you can't click that because that's just some text on the screen, but go put that into your browser and go visit that website and go check out some more information. Again, this has been Rachel. I've been Mike. Rachel, any last thoughts?
If you want to hang out with us on Discord, go join our Patreon. Our lowest tier is like $2, and it gets you Discord access, so you can come hang out with the cool kids.
That's right. And I don't know the tier names, but they're all fun video game references. So they're also entertaining. Yeah, come hang out with us on Discord. We have a lot of fun there. All right. I think we're gonna sign off. Thank you once again, everyone, and have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.